How are you all doing tonight? Welcome. Thanks for joining us again. This is another Lake George Historical Association online lecture. This is the third one we've done so far, successfully, I might add. We did have a little technical difficulty last week with Joseph Cutshaw King, but he's going to be back. We have him rescheduled. Check our Facebook live events, and you'll know exactly when. We have a couple more coming up too in the future. We have a few interesting people planning to join us. Warren County Historical Society is also going to join us. Dr. Alice Green's going to join us. So we have some great lectures coming up. We don't want to announce too many before we're absolutely confirmed because, quite frankly, it's a brand new medium. And people have one set of standards they use when they're driving up to the museum. And they can talk in front of a group, and it's a completely, entirely different animal when you have to have your computer working and plenty of bandwidth. But luckily, the people who've joined us have been terrific about working with us and making sure everything works so we can bring you these lectures online. It's a whole new thing for us, and I hope you're staying safe out there and masking properly, but you can feel free to take your masks off now. That's the other nice thing about this. The museum isn't air conditioned, so it could be miserable if you're sitting in our museum. Plus, you'd all have to be 6 feet away from each other, and the speaker might have to be yelling, but not so here. So relax with whatever you're drinking, and if you're not wearing pants, that's okay too. I won't talk about whether I am, but today we have somebody special who sometimes wears pants, sometimes does not. But we have Bridget Simpson, open water swimmer. She's been swimming in Lake George since about 2015. She's seen steady increases in her distances. She had a goal of a swim in Hague a few years ago. She met with other swimmers on the lake, and having the lake close by, she found to be a terrific inspiration and an impetus for the training she did. And she's here to talk about us. Here to talk about the lake. She's here to talk about swimming, the organization she's raised money for and that she belongs to, and all of the things that maybe many of you wonder about open water swimming. I have a number of questions which aren't simply based on why, but right now I'd like to welcome Bridget.
Thanks, Gary. How you doing?
Hey, how are you, Bridget?
So far, so good, and we have Wi-Fi, and life is good so far. So let's hope that holds.
Great. I've been looking forward to this because your story is very interesting, and the stories you have to tell are very interesting. Not the least of which is I'm going to be wondering, I'm sure you're going to give it all you got to tell everyone why you do what you do. I'm kind of curious. So, what are we going to talk about?
Primarily, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I've spoken about my swimming in the lake. And one thing I'd like to talk about, for the most part, is the lake as its own entity and how I've been relating to that lake and how it has influenced my swimming in other venues and coming back home to this lake. Uh, See how that goes, and then we can address any questions anybody has toward the end. Um, the first cover picture you have there is Lake George right off Ticonderoga Beach. And there you have it, inspired by Lake George, a lake for all seasons. And most people do travel up here in the summer. We're going to start with Ticonderoga Beach. That is my home area. I live in Ticonderoga, so what you see there is where I do a lot of my swimming most days. And anyone familiar with the area, you can see that you've got the lines marking out the beach area, the pretty sand. Rogers Rock off behind the lifeguard stand is the first landmass you see. And that's kind of intriguing for me because I've swum past it several times now. But one thing about Lake George that has proven the case for me is that what you see here is a very small part of Lake George, and it looks pretty darn big in that picture. And it always looked big to me, and it still is a significant amount of water. But what I find interesting is that After swimming in Lake George, my perspective on the lake itself and the landscape and my own ability to get where I'm going has shifted over the past few years. And it's proven very interesting. And I never would have thought when I first started swimming at Ticonderoga Beach that I would end up swimming where I have swum since. Uh, that small amount of a much larger lake is really kind of a metaphor for how my swimming has developed over the past few years. There is not an area in that picture I could not swim to tonight if I went down to the beach right now and got in the water. And it does not look like that, but my perspective has shifted dramatically. And that's not as far as it really looks. It looks like it would take forever in a boat to get to those far shores, but they're a lot closer than they seem. So if we could skip to the next one, Gary. Gives us a little wider view on the next slide. After swimming at the beach inside the ropes for a long time and training largely in that area, I started swimming with a pod of triathletes a few times a week and expanding how far afield I would swim in my area. And off to the left of the screen, you can see a landmass pointing down toward the lake. And at that point, there is a little tree I think of as the Y tree. It looks like a Y. And we swim to there and back, and that's a mile course. And that feels a lot better to me than going back and forth within the lines or the ropes of the beach. So I like that course now, and I've gotten to the point where I can swim that comfortably with the group. I pushed for a while to try to keep up with them as they were training for Ironman, and I was still getting back into open water. But I've worked a little bit and kept up a little bit more every year, and been able to take those practice sessions into attempting other swims further afield. And I've been able to swim in some pretty interesting places in the past few years. I've gone down and swum outside the Statue of Liberty's security area, where 100 of us jumped off a ferry into the New York harbor down near the Hudson, and swum back past Ellis Island. And as the descendant of Irish immigrants, that's a pretty darn cool experience rather. But the other thing that was cool about that swim was looking across the water at the New York City Financial District and seeing a body of water framed by an urban landscape. So that was kind of my big eye-opener, that the waters that intrigue me most to get into and swim are framed in some way, whether it's by an urban landscape or this fabulous natural landscape that we have up here in Lake George. So I've spent a lot of time looking at how Lake George is framed by those mountains, and I've really gotten to know that one stretch of the lake very, very well, and I really enjoy it. And the sky that you see there is one of my favorite kinds of sky to look at over Lake George when I'm swimming, just that clear wash of blue from one side of the lake to the other, and to see how that changes with the time of day and through the seasons. So if we could skip to the next one. Time. I've spent a lot of time in that lake, and I've swum in that lake in every single time of day. And I trained to swim the length of Lake George a few years ago and knew that that was going to take me a long time. The lake is 32 miles long, and it took me just over 28 hours to do it. And I expected it to take me over 24 hours. So I knew that I had to be ready to swim in that lake at any time of day, and to swim overnight, and to swim for a long time. And what I've discovered is I'm easily amused. And when I'm in the lake, I really enjoy just watching how the sun crosses the sky and how the moon rises and sets. And the time it takes me to swim past a landmass like what you see there in the top picture, the daytime picture, is Rogers Rock from the other direction. I was swimming north at that time in one of my early training swims coming up from Hague. And sometimes I'm still a little taken aback by just how big that lake is, but I really do enjoy it. And Rogers Rock, I actually swim past it to that point routinely now. That's part of a swim I do most weeks. I'll go from Thai Beach out past Rogers Rock and keep going toward the back of Anthony's Nose. If the people who are in the area know that that's the top end, the North Lake, and from Anthony's Nose south is more of a straightaway down to Lake George Village. Takes a little bit of time, takes me about 2 hours to get past Rogers Rock and then another 2 or so to go back. And that's a nice swim for me. I like to go out and swim for a couple of hours or a couple of miles at a clip. And time passes in the lake differently than it passes on land for me. And getting past Rogers Rock the first time seemed to take forever. But as I mentioned earlier, perspective has shifted as I've gotten used to the lake. And now swimming from where you see me there for the hour and a half it would take me to get back to Thai Beach, it flies. Time just flies. And I'm looking at familiar houses and docks and trees and just the changes in the light and the clarity of the water. Even at night, when I started swimming at night, I was very pleased to see how clear that water is in the moonlight. And I can see clear through as much at night as I can during the day. So rocks, turtles, fish, anything that's there is there to keep me company. The occasional golf ball. Not sure why people are golfing into the lake, but there are plenty of golf balls on the bottom of Lake George in the shallows. I don't golf, so I can't really explain it. But time is very different in the lake, and there's really no time that it's not a good time to be on the lake. I particularly like swimming at night. I like to swim the sun up. I like to swim the sun down. I like to swim in a mist or a fog. But when I've got moonlight up there, that's a particular favorite for me. The lake is quiet. Most of the boats are home in their docks, and I use a tow float that glows in the dark, and it increases my visibility. So I feel a little more secure at night than I do during the day because the boats are slower and more rare, and I'm more visible. So that lets me swim a little further away from docks and buoys and boats so that I don't crash into them, because my blind spot is huge. I look to one side and then the other, and I don't look in front of me very often. So whatever's in front of me is fair game to get bumped into on occasion, which I try to avoid. So swimming further from shore at night is a real treat for me. And over time, I've gotten used to the landscape up in my area, and I don't worry as much about getting back to the beach on the first shot coming from that wide tree a half mile off the beach, because I'm going to run into Taroga Point at some point. And if I'm one side of the beach or the other, I can make a correction, and that's fine. And I can get to the beach from a different angle and see it more clearly off one shoulder or the other, and get back to my car and go where I need to go for the night. So daytime or nighttime, it's all good for me. And I feel very comfortable navigating just by looking at the mountains. If I can see the mountains on either side of me and know that I'm going in a relatively straight line and see the bottom, I'll know if I'm not going to accidentally pass Taroga Point. And even if I do, I can backtrack if I end up at Mossy Point. It's just a longer swim that way. So let's see, let's shift to the next one. Other way.
Woo.
There we go. Time again. I've always thought of open water swimming as a summer thing, and the lake is available for swimming at the beach, and it's great. People come and they use the beach while it's open, and then they close up the beach and take the ropes away, and people start bringing their docks in and stop boating. But a few years ago, I had a chance to swim into October, and I realized that I really like that. And the lake is absolutely stunning in the fall foliage, and I was able to tolerate the temperature. As long as I kept swimming periodically into the fall, I started to really expand how far into the fall I could manage. And early October was not a bad start, and in subsequent years I would go a little further afield. And that was great because for a long time I haven't had access to winter swimming or pool swimming. And as an open water swimmer, most open water swimmers will train in a pool primarily. 20 years ago when I first started, I was living in Maryland, so the only place I really could train was in pools. And when I wanted to do open water swim, it meant going to an event. So I maybe did open water swimming a few times a year, whereas now the lake is right there and I can swim open water anytime I want. So I got very spoiled and I started to push the envelope a little bit a few years ago and swam into the fall. And if you switch to the next one, you'll see why. Oops, back there you go. I look at that. That's that beautiful venue right off Thai Beach. It's right here. And watching the sky change and watching the foliage change, all the greens go to gold and some reds in there and oranges. Sometimes the lake is just as clear as glass, like you see in those pictures, totally reflecting the sky, and sometimes the wind kicks up a little bit. And either way, it's a beautiful place to be. And it's close enough that I can sneak off like I did that day before work and get a quick swim in, and then, keep the professional office attire in the car and a hairbrush in the glove compartment and not go to work quite that scary looking. But but it's a great way to start the day. And as the days get shorter and the sunrise comes up a little bit later, I get to swim the sun up a little later in the day. I don't have to be getting up in the wee hours of the morning into October. October and November, the sun lets me sleep a little later. So the next slide down the row shows a little bit of an earlier start. If you can switch to the next one. There we go. Same beach, same venue, but looking back over my shoulder into the sunrise, and it's just gorgeous. The way the mountains are silhouetted and that clear sky and the beautiful reflection on the water, that's a great way to start the day. Stopping to see that and swim in that in the morning before work is an absolute luxury, and I really enjoy it. And for some reason, nobody else really wants to be there. I mean, I see people walking their dogs or just out for a run. Occasionally at that time of year, I'll still see one or two boats out and about, or somebody pulling a dock in and saying goodbye to the lake for the season. But by that time of the year, it's pretty much mine. I can swim where I want to at that point and not have too many worries. A few more leaves in the lake, and swimming through a patch of leaves is occasionally a little bit goofy, but it's not a problem. I don't mind that at all. Let's see what comes up next. Oh, there you go. First snow of the year. What's your first thought? My first thought was to put a blast out of emails and Facebook pictures and comments and say, okay, it's snowing out. Who wants to go to the beach? Because why not? So as soon as my daughter got off to school, I didn't have to be at work until about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And somebody was willing to go to the beach with me. Thank you, Linda and Jim, and bring a camera. And those pictures became some of my Christmas cards for the next few years. And I have to tell you, woke up to the most fabulous snow globe world, big fat snowflakes. And I had just recently been in the lake, so I knew the water was still good. And in those pictures, I think the water temperature there was still about 50. And having been in consistently to that temperature, it was fine. And Linda has commented that I get in the water faster in the colder weather than I do in the summer, when I tend to be a little bit whiny about getting, it's wet, it's wet. But that day was just beautiful. By the time we got there, the snow was not quite as fluffy as it had been, but it was still just such a magical experience. And I never ever dreamed I would go swimming in the snow, I have to say. Never dreamed, but having done it once, I was pretty well hooked. And you can see this is the same view, the same landscape we looked at earlier, with the clarity and the blue sky and the summer sun. And the mist and the clouds are rolling in, and the fog is right there, and everything is a little bit more mystical and primordial. And I just really, really enjoyed swimming in the snow that day and could not wait to try it again. So if we could see a next one. I think the next one has video. There we go. And again, Lake George has given me a whole new perspective on what it means to have a good day to swim at the beach. The weather is a big deal for me. And again, I have to say that I see a day like that, and I see the posts online about boaters saying, oh, it's too rough out there. Not a good day for boating on Lake George. And for me, that's a good thing, because then I don't have to worry about boats, because for me, that water is beautiful. That was a fabulous day. I like chop. I like it when the wind kicks up the water, and then I can really play and dance in the water. And it's just, for me, it's a lot of fun all summer long. If we have a stormy day, as long as there's no thunder or lightning, I'm happy. Um, that to me works really well. So I don't know why. It's close to the ocean, but without riptides and sharks. And it's just a really great way to spend the day. And I do love to swim in a busy lake that's got a few white caps and the wind. And sometimes the wind will blow enough that I can actually feel the spray coming off the surface of the water onto me. And that's kind of cool too. Uh, so as far as weather goes, for me, the only weather that will keep me from really wanting to go into the lake and swim is what I have to face when I come out. Um, if there's a whole lot of wind and I'm thinking that all my towels and blankets and warm clothes are going to get blown up into the treetops, that's not something I want to face down. If I'm going to be coming out of the water into really cold air and sleet or rain or something like that, that's not something I want to have any part of, because it's just there's no fun in that. Your stuff gets all wet, and after you have a cold swim, you want to get warmed up, and hard to do that if your stuff has gotten soaked. But let's see. One more. And why stop there? The longer I kept swimming, the more I enjoyed it, and the more I realized how different cold swimming is from summer swimming. And I was really lucky that I had some very kind people willing to spot me. And you can't tell, but way out in the water there, next to one of the tree branches off the point, is Jim Cunningham in his canoe out there checking the water temperature for me. And so I knew what I was getting into. The colder water does feel different, and I don't know how really to explain it. Um, but I feel like I've got an igloo effect going on. Um, I can tell that the water is cold. Obviously, the water is very cold on some days. Right there, it was in the high 30s. Um, I can feel that it's chilly on my skin, but I'm doing okay inside. And over the past few winters, I've gone from an awareness that I had to relearn how to swim in cold water. Being in cold water takes a lot more energy. Uh, it changed my breathing pattern. I needed to breathe more frequently for the first winter. And I also had to remember to start slowly and not rush into things, to take time and let my body get used to the change in the water, and to do a constant check of how I was doing head to toe. It's the most disciplined, focused swimming that I do, is the cold swimming, and it's incredibly rewarding for that. Uh, I have to pay attention to, are my hands able to open and close? If I get a leg cramp, can I flex my foot enough to work it out? I had a few times in the first winter where I'd put my face in and I'd start to swim and I realized my face hurts, as if you're out in the wind in the snow in the winter, and it's a very cold day and the wind's blowing and you feel that sting on your face. I've felt that a couple times in lake, but not very often and not lately. Um, One of the things about the lake is that I have to be able to take it in the moment. I have to pay attention to how things are on a particular day and literally to that minute, because each minute can be different at the colder temperatures. And that's life. But swimming the first winter, I could definitely feel that it was a struggle. It was hard work, but I also realized that if I could stick to it for about a quarter mile, I'd loosen up and get comfortable, and I found a rhythm and I was able to keep going. My goal is to someday get what's called an ice mile, which is 1 mile in 41 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. And last winter, I came within 55 yards of that. And in the summer, if I have a goal and I want to get somewhere and I get tired or I get hungry or I'm slowing down or the weather changes and I have to finish my swim, I can push the envelope. I can swim a while if I'm not feeling my best. I can keep going for shoot, I've been known to keep going for hours with my eyes half closed. But cold water is very different, and you have to respect that. So when it's time to get out, it's time to get out immediately. So those last 55 yards were not an option. I had had a really good winter up to that point of working with Jim, and Linda would watch on shore and get a few videos like this and help me document it. And we worked out a specific course, so I knew exactly where I wanted to swim, exactly how far from shore. Most of the time in cold water like that, I'm in shallow enough water that I can brush my fingertips on the sand if I want to. So I'm very fussy about where I swim when it's that cold, and how I'm feeling. It's, any sign of a shiver is a red flag, and I've never shivered in a cold swim. That would be very dangerous, and it's not worth it. And I have too much respect for people willing to go and hang out with me for a cold swim to do anything that would cause them distress or a lousy end of the day. So if you wanted to run this video, Gary, to just see the pacing, I had already swum across the beach, down the point, back, and I was on my return trip, I believe. So I had already gone about a half of a mile, and Jim was calling out to me the distances, and he would say 6/10. I'd swim along, and I was at that time thinking, okay, I'm still cruising right along. I'm feeling pretty good about this. This is the day it's going to happen. 7/10, 8/10, and at 8/10, I realized that, okay, I need to make a quick course change. I wasn't going to go the full length of the beach the way I had originally planned. I wanted to zigzag a little bit to build that last bit of distance closer to shore and closer to where my shoes and towel were. And when I turned around, my stroke kind of fell apart for a few strokes, and I was okay, but I just definitely was not feeling like this was the day to finish the mile. So when Jim said 9/10 of a mile, I knew that further tenth of a mile was not going to happen that day. And it was okay, because what my goal is with that lake is to go my distance on my day and live with that. And if I've given it my best shot and I've done what I need to do to be ready, then I'm happy. And that day was an odd day. And this is where each day is different. And knowing the details of what's going on around you can be useful in an academic sense, but how it fits you physically is going to be different. That day was significantly warmer than earlier in the week when I had done a training swim. And I figured, okay, that swim went great. I was in for a half an hour. I did most of the mile. It was just a training swim. But at that point, the water temperature earlier in the week was 41 point something. So it wasn't going to suit for what I needed for the official ice mile. This day was perfect for the water temperature, but I did not know the water temperature. I just knew the air temperature was significantly warmer than earlier in the week and that there was no wind. So I thought this is going to be great. But not knowing the water temperature, and it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because I can't tell how the temperature will hit me until I'm in it. After the fact, I realized that the water temperature had dropped 2 full degrees Fahrenheit, and at those temperatures, that's significant. So even though I had a really strong start, and I sprinted the first half mile pretty hard, and even into the next tenths, managed to hold good form and really felt confident, just the time of a tenth of a mile is all it took to know that I'd reached my max that day, and that everything working together came together in such a way that I was finished. And that was it. And that was totally fine, because I think I've probably gone further in colder than anybody else in Lake George. And it was really, it was a struggle. That was a hard one. And that was also academically an interesting swim, because it took a lot longer to recover from than I had gotten used to. Over the course of the 2 winters, my recovery time from cold swimming had gotten dramatically improved. I was able to handle the swim itself very well, but I was also able to come back to feeling normal afterwards a lot more efficiently. And this swim really took a lot out of me. When you do a cold swim like this, there's a condition called after drop. So when I get out of the water, normally I have about 5 minutes of feeling totally normal where I want to get my shoes on and get my towels situated and start to change into dry clothes and be ready for action or inaction, as the case may be, within 5 minutes. And because after that is when my body will try to warm itself back up to where it wants to be and shiver. And then that's where you want to have the hot fluids, not too hot. Everything has to be Goldilocks just right. And if you're going to have hot cocoa after a really cold swim, you want to have a lid on it so that it doesn't get in your eyes, because you do tend to shake a little bit during the after drop phase. And a lot of times for after drop, I can expect a short swim, 15 minutes to a half hour swim, probably going to take me that long to recover. And that's a workout in itself. I read somewhere this fall that shivering burns about 400 calories an hour. So if I'm going to do a workout, this counts. Even if I do a short swim, it adds up. And I have to say, I've really gotten to enjoy the challenge of the cold swims. My shoulders don't feel like rocks in the cold water anymore. I feel fluid. I feel ready for action. And up until this one last swim where I really went the distance, most of my recovery has gotten remarkably shorter. So I can feel that I've done a cold swim for hours afterwards. Kind of like the difference between if you're wearing slippers with socks and without socks. It's just that kind of a difference. It's nothing dramatic. It's not like, something really hurts or muscle ache or whatever. It's just a goofy feeling that's different. And it works for me. So I think I'm going to be keeping going with the cold swimming. And oddly enough, there are days lately where if the lake temperature dips a little bit and the wind kicks up, yeah, I'm going to feel a chill now, but it's a different chill. And that's the biggest thing the lake has taught me in the past few years, is to just be aware of where I am in the moment, how things are impacting me in the moment, and cope accordingly and try to be ready for anything. Whether it's a longer distance in a warmer swim or the really short power cold swims, they both have something to offer, and I really value the opportunity to explore both ends of the spectrum. So if we can go to the next one, I think the next one should be, okay, there we go. Every year spring comes a little earlier for me. And again, we've got the perspective of the lake. The top picture on this slide is an actual swim picture from about from springtime. Probably one of the colder days I've swum. The water was about 36 to 37 degrees. And it was my first serious swim of last year. And chugging right along, had a great time. And I went in with no preconceived notions. I had no idea whether I would do 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I ended up doing 5.5 minutes and got out before I felt like I had gone too far. I always make sure that I am aware of the fact that I have to not only do the swim, I have to get out, I have to get dressed, I have to get ready for action, even if I have a spotter, which I obviously did that day. Everything has to work together, and I have to know my limits, and I'm the one who decides my limits. So for me, that was a limit that day. Other days might have different limits, and it's on me. I have to figure out my limits, and everybody has to figure out personal limits on any given day. And Lake George is fascinating because if you look at those pictures, the swimming picture came first. And then a few days later, I went to the beach and saw where the wind had blown all the bits of ice up onto the shore. And it was so funny to see my poor little lake looking broken. And then within days, it was all clear. And then I could start getting my feet wet at the beach again, which I really like to do. Even if I'm not swimming in the cold in the winter, I try to maintain my tolerance for the cold by wading. And, let's see, what's our next picture shows a bit of wading instead of actual swimming. I went to the boat launch on a day when I was not having the best of days. the lake is usually a beautiful, wonderful, happy place to be. And most of the time when people go there, they're going for visiting and vacationing and picnicking. And I'll go for training. But this day, February 1st, 2020, that was a sad day. I was not having my happiest day that day. And for me, that meant getting my feet wet. And I'd been stalking the lake for days, going back to see if I could get to the water. And knowing the boat launch as well as I do, I knew how deep the water was under the ice. And I knew that I'd be okay walking with my garden clogs on the leaves and twigs and just letting the cold water help me clear my mind of things that were bothering me. And that makes a big deal. That's a big deal for me. It made all the difference for several times during the winter when things were not going well out of the lake. It was very good to be able to get into the lake and let it take my mind off difficult days and to be able to focus on the fact that yes, it was very cold and I had to pay close attention to how I felt, because even just getting as wet as I am there in that photo or in the video, I had my winter coat on, I had a sweater on. When I got back to the car, I got jeans on and wool socks and the whole thing, and I still had afterdrop. And I still had to deal with warm fluids afterwards. So just that little bit, you know, I may be able to swim in the cold water for an extended period of time, but just getting your feet wet really does make a difference. So, and I go in on purpose, and that's very different from people who might fall in or drop in or go through the ice accidentally. It's a totally different experience, and I would not want to be going in by surprise. So I just wanted to toss that out there because I am a lifeguard and I am a water safety instructor, and I know how important it is to be mindful of the cold and to be aware of the cold and the dangers that can be involved. And I'm extremely careful, and I watch every bit of time I spend in the lake in the colder waters. And I'm very attentive to how I'm feeling, how my circulation is going, and the rest of it. So, but being able to focus on something outside of me and to focus on the cold and the ice and the snow let me then be able to look around and see the landscape and enjoy that and hear the geese coming around and enjoy that and to take my mind off of rough days. So thank you, Lake George, for that. A few days later, I had another swim. A few weeks. That was my first serious swim. And I went to the lake because, again, strange days. And I wasn't really ready to swim that day. I always have a suit in the car. I always have my warm gear in the car for after a swim, but I didn't have my goggles. I didn't have my earplugs. I didn't have my nose clip, but I just had a need to get wet. I had to get in that lake and see how it was going and look at how beautiful it is. I mean, that sky reflected on the water and the mountains in the distance, and the water was just a soft ripple, and it was just compelling. And that was a day where I really needed to go swimming. And I now know that, thank God I've had those couple of winters behind me, I can do it. I can at least get wet and see how I feel and decide whether it's a day to go for a full swim or whether I'm just going to wait. And that was a full swim day. So go ahead and hit play, because that was a fun one. It's the old school lifeguard heads up swim. So because I can't swim without my nose clip or I get wicked allergies, and that means I can't swim. But it's just a great lake. How do you not try it out? Even by March 7th, the water was already up into the 40s, and it was too warm for an ice mile. So that was just a swim for the sake of having a beautiful swim on a beautiful day. Even as short as this is, it was worth the trip and worth the time it took to warm up afterwards, because that one, even as short as that swim is, that's the whole swim right there, that takes a bit to warm up from that. All right, and that pretty much covers how much I enjoy swimming in Lake George all year, any time of day, any season. There's not a month in the year I have not set foot in that lake, and there's not a time of day I'm not happy to go swimming. So, anyone else want to go?
Issuing that challenge.
Hey, how do you say no to that? Look at that. It's beautiful. I mean, you've got the picture in the background there with the mist rising up. That's a stunning picture. I just want to go there.
It sure is. It is. What I have to say, I thank you so much for bringing the perspective you brought. Um, the interesting thing about perspective, when you started talking about that, and it's something, even though I'm the shoreline swimmer of Lake
Mhm.
George, grew up here, only went to the beach, swam a little bit, boated. And one thing I always noticed was, yeah, the perspective of the lake changes. All the people who visit
Mhm.
usually do it from the land,
Right.
and you have a perspective and you have a view of where everything is. And one thing I found out was, from the water, it's all different. It's
Hmm.
an entirely different thing when the focus is in the water, and you
Yeah.
really brought that out in the talk. I really appreciate that.
The
You did have a
surface
few
level.
questions.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You did.
Who's got a question?
Yeah. Leslie asked about the wildlife. You had started to talk
Oh,
the
yeah.
swim you did at night and everything, and she was wondering what kind of wildlife you ran into while you were swimming, maybe
I've
unexpectedly.
had a few very interesting encounters with wildlife in the lake. I see a lot of fish, and from a technical standpoint, they're fish. That's all I know about them. They swim, and I swim, and they're just fish. Turtles. I've seen turtles that are the big and little itty bitty turtles. They're so cute. Um, the fish tend to not care. The turtles do swim away if you get too close to them. Um, I was swimming by a dock one night last summer with my tow float lit up like a pumpkin, and I felt something scratching the back of my leg. And I thought, well, maybe one of my swim friends has caught up with me. And if you're in a pool and somebody wants to pass you in a lane, they tap your feet, which some people think is kind of rude, but that's how you do it. And then that's to get your attention so they can come up alongside you and pass you on the left. And I turned around to see if it was one of my swim friends because it's a definite scratch. And I was like, wait a second, that's a little rude. And it was a great big dog.
Oh.
And right behind him was his little friend following me in the lake. And I'm like, that's different. And I kept going because I was close to my Y tree. And on my way back, I'm getting into the same area and there's a dock full of people. And I just stopped and I looked up and I was like, that doesn't happen often. And they said, well, we didn't know what to do. And I'm thinking, put your dog on a leash, people, please. So that was an unexpected bit of wildlife. We've seen
Wow.
eagles out on the trees. They don't come into the water too much. I've swum past lots of ducks and lots of geese, and I have one friend I have seen in the lake. We've been encountering each other in the lake for the past 4 summers, and she's a California athlete and does Ironman and triathlon of that ilk. And we'll see each other. And last year we actually physically crashed into each other. I didn't realize she was in the state, and I'm swimming one way, she's swimming, and we crashed shoulders. And like, whoa, what happened? And we still laugh about it. It's so funny that, I mean, what are the odds that somebody from the East Coast
Right.
and West Coast are going to crash into each other in a lake? So I mean, I know it's not exactly wildlife, but it was a pretty wild encounter. Uh, most of the time when we see each other from a safe distance and can approach cautiously. And that's pretty much the best. I have not seen anything else untoward. One of the first times I swam in the lake with somebody paddling alongside to help me navigate, that person did see a snake.
Oof.
Therefore, I eventually saw the snake. But I saw the snake because she freaked out so much that she fell out of her safe canoe into the water with the snake, which
Oh.
I didn't fully understand. But she did get back into the canoe and off we went. So, and the snake didn't really seem to care what was happening. So I wasn't terribly worried. I haven't had anything alarming happen in the lake
That's
with
good.
animal life. I mean, the worst
Oh.
thing is at night there are a few bugs, and occasionally I'll inhale one, and that's not exactly the midnight snack you want, but it's
You
a risk.
mentioned early in the talk, you mentioned swimming in the Hudson. And I
Yes.
have to wonder what the differences you notice besides the shoreline being urban. And I mean, in terms of the taste, the smell of the water, and maybe your fear
The
of
Hudson's
running into
brackish.
garbage in the water.
No. They have cleaned up the Hudson a lot. When I first
I'm
started
aware,
open
yeah.
water swimming, yeah, when I first started open water swimming, what they call it's 20 bridges now. It's the swim that goes around Manhattan Island. It's about 28.5 miles long, and you go under 20 bridges, hence the name. And one of these days, man, I'm on that. But the Hudson is brackish, and it actually has tides,
All right.
and it has a bit of a saltiness to it, and I really enjoyed it. The swimming by the Statue of Liberty, I mean, what's not to love? I would have swum through garbage for that, but I didn't have to. It was fine. It was totally fine.
Well,
There was nothing
true patriot.
untoward,
That's
well
great.
populated. It was a beautiful swim. It was just a short, I think it was maybe a mile and a half. It was just a gorgeous day, and jumping off a ferry into the Hudson was just, what more do you want, right? Uh, but I
Right.
had a chance to swim a 10K up here in Hague in Lake George, and it was a big goal of that year. It was the same year I did my big solo of the length of the lake, and 2 weeks later I did this 10K, and I had to really sprint a 10K to make the cutoff, and it took me just over 4 hours and like 50 some seconds or something. I just made it, and after that I went down to the Hudson, where the race is called the Spiten Dival, or the Spitting Devil. It's where the Harlem meets the Hudson.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, that goes back a
Sure.
ways.
Yep.
Anyway, that 10K
Yep.
took me under 2 hours. So the Hudson is a really nice place to be if you're with the current. And that was a joyride.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just flying down that river, and it was a gloomy day. There's actually a picture further down the slides than the one you have there. If you go down maybe 4 slides, there's one. I'm in a blue dress. There you go. That was a picture from Spite and Dival. And the person I'm with in that picture is Jamie Monahan, who has been Open Water Swimmer of the Year on numerous occasions. She's fabulous. She's done ice swimming. She's done marathon swimming. She actually swam Lake George in August of 2016, the year before I did. And when she swam it, she was the fastest to swim it until Carolyn Block came back in the springtime and just totally annihilated all of us. But Jamie was down there for that swim, and we got to swim from JFK Marina down toward that bridge. In the background is the George Washington Bridge. And the only thing that was a problem with that swim was we stopped before we got to that bridge, and under that bridge is a little red lighthouse. And one of these days I'm swimming by the little red lighthouse. Because it was my favorite storybook when I was a little girl. So I'm swimming by Little Red Lighthouse.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that Jamie's actually in the chat room.
Hi, Jamie.
Yeah.
Jamie makes Whiteface look really good. Nobody wears diaper cream like Jamie Monahan.
Yeah, she does look very fresh. Very fresh right there.
There you go. No,
well, Jamie had a question. And she wanted to know what other swims were on your short list. Your wish list, excuse me.
Well, I was really hoping to do Lake George again this summer, but between trying to get English Channel rules for marathon swim purposes and COVID protocols, it proved a little bit daunting, and I couldn't get anybody interested in trying it out. But I do want to swim Lake George again. I also would like to swim the southern coast of Rhode Island, where I used to go to the beach when I was little. And someday I would like to swim I have no interest whatsoever in an English Channel crossing, but I would like to swim in the channel between Utah and Omaha beaches to commemorate Normandy, the landing. I think that would be a really neat swim. If I could keep my cold water training up for a couple of years and get my ducks in a row, I would love to do that for a commemoration swim for the 80th anniversary of D-Day.
A couple of people, speaking of cold water, had asked, and I remember I talked to you about it earlier when we were practicing for this or rehearsing. about using a wetsuit or using water shoes? You don't use any of that.
The closest I come to water shoes is depending on where I'm swimming. Like if I swim near the boat launch or something and the bottom is a little sketchy and the parking lot is very gritty and gravelly, I'll wear my garden
Right.
clogs, uh, but not for a documented swim.
Yeah, I was going to say they
I,
don't work out well for swimming, I'm sure.
no, they're a little goofy. But the beach, if I'm swimming at the beach, the sand is lovely, and I have no problem barefooting it in the sand. I'll wear my garden clogs to the shoreline, like if I have to go through snow, because I only want to touch something cold once coming out of that water,
Yeah.
and that's going to be the shoes, and then they stay on my feet, and I can get through the snow and get where I need to be.
Yeah.
Um,
That's part of the other question was people had asked whether or not you initial preparations for cold water swimming, and it seems that you're just simply in tune with what your body's telling you rather than doing any special exercises. Maybe you stretch.
no, I don't. I prepare for what I do by doing what I do. So if I want to swim in cold water, I just keep swimming from the summer into the fall and just make sure that I'm not away from the lake for more than a few days. Um, but even then, after being into the cold water significantly, like I had the break between January, I was still wandering the lake in January and missed a few weeks in February where the ice coverage was not letting me get to the water. So by the time I was able to get to the water again, I'd have a few weeks out, and I was okay. I just take my time and see how it feels, and if it's a day to swim, it's a day to swim, and if it's not, it's not. Um,
Yeah.
but that's on me. And different people do different things. A lot of people try to prepare for ice swims by taking cold showers and sitting in ice baths, and I'm not doing that. I get in the water and I have to swim, and that's the
Right.
only reason I'm willing to put up with cold water like that, because I don't even get my face wet in the shower. I'm sorry. It's a cold shower not happening.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of people, I've kind of wondered, and I was planning to ask you, so why do you do it? There are a lot of people talking about, they want to climb a mountain because they want to conquer that mountain. They want to conquer this goal. They want to conquer that. It doesn't seem to be about conquering anything other than just you're one with nature. You're one with the lake. And it
Kind of.
seems that you get the pleasure out of being connected to that body of water.
Very much so. I really enjoy the lake. I enjoy it as a landscape, but unlike a landscape that you'll see in a fabulous museum, this is a landscape that I can actually enter and be a part of. And there are several landscapes um, in the world I would love to go swimming in, and some of them are a little chilly. So knowing that I can get used to this lake here kind of opens the door for any possibility. I mean, Jamie has swum in Antarctica with a penguin, for crying out loud. So I'm probably not
Wow.
going there, but I have what I need here. And I've got my little turtle pool thermometer. He trails along behind me, so that's fun. But no, I like this lake because it's here. And I like knowing that if an opportunity comes up to do a swim in colder water, that I can get ready for it and at least feel ready to try it. The year after I swam my solo in Lake George, I thought about doing it again. And it didn't work out, but I still trained a lot, and that was when I did the relay with Louise Rourke for the relay for polio, where I had no idea she could raise that much money. Holy cow. What they managed to pull out for polio is just astonishing.
That's
And it
great.
was great to be a part of that. But there are some swims that are official swims and group swims that I never dreamed I could participate in. And one of them was the Boston Light Marathon swim, and I had applied to participate in that. It's a lottery now. They only let 25 people a year try it. They're very safety conscious. It's an 8-mile swim. They boat you out to Brewster Island, where the beautiful
Hmm.
lighthouse is. And if you go to the next slide after Jamie, that's the Boston Light. That's the Brewster Lighthouse, and that was one of the boats. I think that might have been my boat. Um, that I had to jump off of and swim back to Boston. Um, And again, that's a fabulous landscape. And I worked really hard all summer because I actually got called up that somebody else had to drop out and I got a slot at the last minute. So I was really glad that even with just a few weeks prep time, I felt confident that I could go and do a good, hard ocean 8 mile swim. Fortunately, it was current assist because it was also the longest, coldest swim I've done. I went off that boat, and the guy who was my crew person, the person who made sure that I had food and water and diaper cream and all this other stuff, my official observer, um, wrote in his personal blog that I screamed really loud when I hit the water because my goal when I get into cold water is to try to stay right on the surface and not totally submerge. I have this fabulous fantasy that I can actually keep my shoulders dry for a while, which obviously is not based in reality. But I hit that water and it was cold and it was sudden. It was not tiptoeing in a little bit at a time. It was cold. And I swam hard for a good long time, and I was not warming up. And I swam past a couple of islands, and I'm like, this is not getting any pleasanter. It was raining, it was cloudy. I mean, look at that day. And the person who met me at the shoreline, Jennifer Spencer Dutton, another Lake George swimmer, the year before I swam it, and I was able to see her at another New York State. She came to one of our state lakes and did a solo swim, and I got to meet her there and then to go to her home turf and have her there when I swam was it's just a really neat experience. I was so pleased that she did that, and she met me at the shoreline with an umbrella and a towel and a blanket, and it's very cool. It's very cool to be in that company with her
Yeah,
and
sounds like a
Jamie. And if you
great
go,
community supporting people.
well, if you flip to the next slide has another one of
Sure.
the women who have swum north. For some reason, we're the only ones who have swum north. Carolyn Block, amazing swimmer. She has the coldest swim on record for Lake George. She was also the earliest on the 11th of June, the year I swam, and I swam in August. And we have not met in person. We've met in a socially distant manner. But she was also somebody I was able to communicate with ahead of my swim and since my swim and more recently, and offered a lot of encouragement and suggestions about getting things done. And there's a fabulous picture of the lake looking north toward that's the Hague region. So that's still just a small portion of Lake George, but it gives you an idea of how big that thing is.
Yeah.
And Carolyn and I are both at Diane's Rock, which is in the North End, where Diane Struble started her swim back in 1958.
Right. That's terrific.
And if you go to the next slide,
Yep.
since we're into the bonus slides, those pictures were taken by Diane's daughter, Gwen, who spotted me on a cold training swim after lunch one day. I've gotten to meet her. It's been a real treat. And I thought it was very cool that I was doing a cold swim and being watched over by Diane's daughter the way Diane's mother watched over her during her training swim. So that was just another neat thing about where this whole open water business in Lake George has taken me and some of the circles that have happened.
Wonderful. Great.
So, thanks, Gwen.
Well, and thank you. Thank
Sure.
you so much, Bridget, for coming on and talking with us.
No problem.
We had a great talk. We had a lot of good interaction with the chat room. Some friends, too.
Any other last minute questions? Or?
Yeah, sure. Those were all questions from the chat room, actually. Christine said, "What a great talk. Wonderful job as always." Leslie said, "Thank you for sharing your experiences." Ken said, "Why no wetsuit?" That was kind of my question previously.
I don't enjoy it. I have a wetsuit. I bought a wetsuit when I was under the influence of a triathlete. And I found the last time I wore it for one of my autumn swims here because the other triathletes had been training for Ironman and I had been out of the lake for a few weeks and I was already pokey compared to them with their wetsuits. So I dug it out of the garage and pulled it on, and all of a sudden I'm the fastest one in the water, which was kind of fun, except it does keep you warmer and it keeps you higher in the water. So for me, it makes my stroke very sloppy, and it makes me arch my back in a strange way that's very uncomfortable for me, especially for a longer swim. It also chafes uncomfortably, and because I get a lazy swim kick, my feet stick out and then they don't stay warm. So I'm actually colder in my extremities with the wetsuit, and then trying to wrestle out of it at the end of the swim. It's just not worth the bother. It's easier just to acclimate for me. And
Sure.
I know other people feel differently, and that's great. And you get to do what you want to do. I'm not entirely sure where my wetsuit ended up, but
Leslie had a question. She asked if you've ever swung in Chesapeake Bay.
oh yeah, I love the Chesapeake. I've swum the spans of the Chesapeake 3 times, twice with a wetsuit, once without. And again, this was back in the day. I think the last time I swam it was in June of 2003. Cold, gloomy day for the Chesapeake for that time of year. It was in the low 60s, and I think the water was about 62. And it was a 4.5 mile swim through the spans, and it's just a powerhouse swim. It's a major shipping channel. They shut down the traffic for that swim every year, and it is a fabulous swim. Very popular. They only let about 600 people participate, and it's by lottery. So there's no guarantee going in that you'll get a slot. So one of these days, I'd love to take another crack at it. But I've done it a few times. I still have the T-shirt. I got the sweatshirt, and it was great. But that was a really good. I really enjoyed that, and I've had my feet in the Chesapeake a few times since, just for fun, when I've gone down to visit Maryland. But I haven't swum that. I've also swum the Potomac. That was my first official marathon swim without a wetsuit, 7.5 miles from Virginia to Maryland.
Oh,
So
well, I'll tell you what. You spend a lot of time in the Northeast, and you're going to keep making that circle wider and wider. I can't wait to hear about your other exploits as time goes by.
no
We can't
problem.
wait to maybe have you back too. That would be great.
Well, maybe we can get some more people swimming in that lake.
Oh yeah, all the time.
It's
It's
beautiful.
popular. And especially now, there's less people than ever.
I'm very aware of how incredibly fortunate I am to have access to this lake at this time, particularly in the early part of this year, February, March, and stuff, before the pandemic really hit, and then
Right.
as it hit, because so many swimmers worldwide have not had this opportunity. And their pools have been closed, their primary beaches have been closed, everything has been shut down. Only people in isolated places like this have really been able to access swimming in any way, shape, or form. So I've been incredibly fortunate to be able to swim, particularly with how important it has been to me dealing with non-swimming related difficulties in my life. It's been a very serious source of comfort for me in some difficult moments, and I don't know what I would have done without that. It would have been. It's just not the same to walk through the snow barefoot in the backyard. I'm sorry, it's just not. So, it's been
Well,
great.
you make a great ambassador for the sport and the recreation of it all. So
It's a
thank
lot
you
of
so
fun.
much, Bridget, once again.
Anytime.
Anything else you want to tell everybody before we sign off?
Go jump in a lake.
Go
I've got a
jump.
spare buoy in the float. I'll head out there right now. Perfect time.
Classic.
Sun's down. Moon's coming up.
We'll look for Bridget up near Ticonderoga.
There you go. See you there.
And so I'm going to thank Bridget Simpson once again. I want to thank everybody who joined us in the chat room and asked questions, and everybody who joined us online at our website. That's lakegeorgehistorical.org. You'll see a lot about our exhibits. And join us again in the next Thursday session, which is Dr. Alice Green. Very fascinating talk. Check out our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Lake George Historical or Lake George Historical. And that's all. So thanks again for joining us. Thanks, Bridget.
Sure.
Bye-bye, everybody.